Okay, so my experience with Dominion and the EON really dates back to early discussions with the team in the design and the prototyping phase. It just so happens that the Dominion Laser Lab is a very short drive away from my office in Orlando, and I knew some of the key players. So I've helped with some of the pre-approval studies, and I was one of the 3 PIs in the FDA approval study, along with Dr. Jill Weibel and Dr. Suzanne Kilmer, who are also very well-known names in the laser world. And recently, we've completed a second abdominal treatment study with 26 patients using an improved power delivery protocol. And the study, I'm happy to say, has gone through the peer review process with ASJ, that is Aesthetic Surgery Journal, and has been accepted for publication. And we're hoping to see it in print sometime in the next 6 months. Okay, well, let's start with a review of the marketplace of the non-surgical body contouring devices that are out there. Cool Sculpting, which was really the first device to impact this market segment, is certainly the market leader. As you all probably know, it uses the application of cold plates to induce apoptosis, or programmed cell death of the fat layer. And there are a number of other devices that are energy-based, which heat the fat to a level above the key temperature of 42 degrees Celsius. And this energy can be laser, this energy can be radio frequency, or electromagnetic. Basically, they all work as long as the temperature gets to where it needs to be. And as you can see on this list, there are 2 other companies with laser devices, but you'll notice that their devices literally rest on the patient's skin. They're full contact. And the EON, by contrast, does not. The treatment head of the EON never touches the patient. The drawbacks of the currently available devices are listed here on this slide. The treatment head might be fairly small. The applicator might require some messy gels or pads to apply to the skin. Sometimes the treatments, especially for the heat-based machines, get very hot, and the patient tolerance is frankly limited. The patients are gritting their teeth to get through the treatment. One of my good friends who I trained with jokingly calls his heat-based device a hot stone treatment, but it's a hot stone therapy from hell. So I get a chuckle out of that, and that's not what we want here. And as I mentioned before, there may be disposables required. Certainly that eats into the profit margin for the owner or the user. And then really most importantly, as with everything that we do, how well does this technology really work? And are the patients happy with the results? I know my own experience, I've got an energy-based machine from one of the companies on this slide. I won't say which. I bought it a number of years ago, and I simply could not get any significant results with it, no matter how hard I tried, despite the what their internal studies had shown. So, I think we all have machines that don't live up to expectations and end up collecting dust. The EON really does work and has got science behind it, and we're going to share that in a very transparent way as we go forward. Okay, so here is a photo of a pre-production version of the EON, and there are a couple of features I want to highlight in the design of the machine. First of all, there's a treatment head, which you can see at the end of the robot arm, and the treatment head contains several important things. Number one, you've got the output of the 1064 nanometer diode laser. You've got the series of cooling jets, which keeps the skin cool. So basically the cooling and the heating is coaxial. It's happening at the same time. There's no other cryogen sprays or other disposables there. And also built into the treatment head are the scanning and temperature sensors, and we'll talk about those more later. We've got the robot arm, very similar to what you'd see in an industrial robot, but this robot arm has been completely reprogrammed by the software engineers at Dominion, and so it's a proprietary software that allows the robot arm to move in a much smoother way. There's a touchscreen interface on the machine, and although it doesn't show much in this particular picture, it's very easy to use, and it's a very clean type of design. And finally, there's the base of the machine, which contains the brains of the unit and the various chillers and so forth. As you can see on the slide, the EON is indeed FDA cleared for treatment of the abdomen, and I'm in the midst of a study looking at treatment of the flank area. So in terms of the main features of the EON device, there's a couple I want to highlight. Number one, the robot arm. This is a really unique feature of this device, and it moves the treatment head with exact, predictable motion. It makes the scanning pattern very highly accurate and certainly very repeatable. And you know, you don't have to have anybody doing that manually. You know, that's a very nice feature. There are no applicators that touch the skin. This treatment really is truly touchless for the patient. There's no disposables. The treatment duration is fairly quick. It's 20 minutes for an area of up to 150 centimeters squared. And that's quicker than many of the competing units in this market segment. And there's no postoperative care or postoperative treatment that's required. The patient is immediately able to resume their normal activities. So those are all good things. And if you were designing a machine, you know, from scratch with a clean sheet of paper, you know, a new design brief, these are all the sorts of things that you'd want to see in your theoretically ideal treatment. So currently there are 3 scan patterns. I've asked Ahmed and the engineering team to develop a few more, and he promises me that these are in the works. A couple things I would want to point out. So number one, we know from our previous laser experience that the 1064 nanometer wavelength is very effective for bulk heating of the subcutaneous fat. That's not any question there. The key really is protecting the skin and maintaining the patient's comfort. And the trick to that really is the skin cooling method. The cooling system of the EON uses multiple small jets of cold air that come out of the treatment head. And if you were to measure the temperature of that air, it's around between 11 and 13 degrees Celsius. So it's pretty darn chilly. And that keeps the skin cool. And you know, you might wonder how that would feel, this mix of deep heating and superficial cooling. Well, the patients have a neat way of describing it. And they say it's a bit like the feeling they get when they're lying out in the sun at the beach, but there's a cool breeze blowing across their skin. So they say the treatments really are very comfortable, and you know, they're very well tolerated, and we can talk more about that. Now, there are some operator controlled modes for the patients that are really extra sensitive. There's a feature that we call the quick cool button that gives an extra round of cooling with the laser heating turned off. And there's what we call a light mode, which reduces the laser power by 10% automatically for the duration of the treatment. And I would say the vast majority of our study patients have not needed the light mode, and only a few of them have needed a couple of presses of the quick cool button. Usually the standard protocol works out pretty nicely for the majority of people. So this is a nice graph showing the subcutaneous fat temperatures with the EON on one side compared to other heat-based or energy-based contouring devices. And this is using published data for the other devices, or manufacturers' data from the other devices. And the data from the EON comes from thermocouple studies that I've done. And we've found that the EON consistently elevates that subcutaneous fat temperature up to approximately 49 to 51 degrees, never above 51 though. Okay, so why does this matter? Well, it's that what we call the Arrhenius equation. We know that the relationship between the amount of apoptosis and the internal fat temperature is approximately exponential. And for every degree of temperature elevation between about 42 and 50, you know, the duration of the treatment can be approximately half as long and still get the same amount of apoptosis, the same amount of fat reduction. So this is really why the EON could either do quicker treatments or could have a more effective treatment in the same amount of time. So, you know, you can get, like I said, a nice result, you know, with a significant fat reduction, and more so than the other machines. Plus, we've got the benefit of keeping the skin temperatures nice and cool. An RF machine, the differential between the skin temperature level and the subcutaneous fat temperature can only be about 4 degrees Celsius. So they're limited by the modality that they've chosen. So this is a nice animation, and this is showing how the laser energy nicely heats the fat while the skin stays nice and cool with the air jet system. And this is based on actual thermocouple data. And you can see in the treatment zone, which is between the 5 and 20 millimeter distance, that the fat gets nicely elevated. It gets to those important temperatures above 42 degrees which means we're going to get apoptosis in that zone. But the skin stays cool, do not raise above 42 degrees. So we're not going to get any changes outside of that zone. All right, I'm going to show you a brief video that the company developed so you can get the idea of how the treatment head moves in 3D over the patient. The treatment head coming over the patient, doing a preliminary topographic scan of the patient's contours. And once that's approved by the physician in charge of the treatment, then the treatment head scanning over the patient in a repeated cycle method. That's our macrophage eating up those fat cells. Let's get back to the science part of this. So here's a summary of the recent abdominal treatment study where I was the PI. And we designed a study that very carefully matched our pivotal FDA approval study and also matched some of the competitors' published works so that we could do a kind of a direct comparison. And we treated in this little study 26 patients. We had all Fitzpatrick skin types included. The BMIs, as you see, were between 17 and 32, so nobody crazy thin or super obese. We treated 20 females, 6 males, and a range of ages. The subcutaneous fat thickness was measured by ultrasound at 0, 6, and 12 weeks. And I had an independent ultrasonographer of 20 plus years experience from our local trauma center come and do every single ultrasound measurement for the best possible consistency. And the fat measurements are taken right in the middle of each treatment area. So if a person got 3 different zones of treatment of that of the pattern, they would have 3 ultrasound thicknesses that would be averaged together. Or if they were a male and they were a little bigger and they had 4 zones treated, then they would have had 4 numbers averaged together to get that subcutaneous fat thickness reduction. Okay, and here's what we found. It's in yellow over the 12-week study period. And you can see that the average reduction in the thickness of the sub-Q fat was about 6.3 millimeters, which for a single treatment is quite a lot. And percentage-wise, that worked out to about 21.6% of fat reduction in the subcutaneous fat. So that's very comparable to the market leaders in this segment. Patient satisfaction was very high. And I presented this data at Hot Topics, the ASPS meeting, and it was selected as one of the best of Hot Topics presentations. And as I mentioned earlier, the paper's been accepted by ASJ. Okay, so that 21.6 number that you see there, that is the overall average for the upper and lower abdomen combined. when we broke out the data separately, we found that, interestingly, we got a slightly better reduction in the lower abdomen and a slightly smaller reduction in the upper abdomen. And that's consistent with other work in this area. So here are some photos of actual patients that I treated in this study. And we'll go through a couple of these. We had a professional photographer take all the photos, standard lighting, standard camera setup. We had all the patients with their arms crossed up in front of them. We instructed that the photos should be taken at end expiration with the abdomen relaxed. And we requested that patients maintain their normal diet and their normal exercise patterns and not try to either lose weight or to gain weight. So in his first patient, this 29-year-old male, despite those instructions, he still lost 4 pounds. But he had a pretty impressive contour change, as you can see here. And you can see from 0, the pre-treatment, to 6 weeks that it evolved, and it evolved further for between 6 and 12 weeks. And the measurements in the treatment zones showed an average of about 22%, 23% reduction in the fat thickness. And he got a nice improvement in the abdominal in the anterior part of the abdomen, which is where the applicators were located. A nice improvement there. So this lady was 50 years old, and she actually gained 4 pounds over the course of our 12-week study. But despite that, you can see she's got an improved contour in the anterior abdomen where we did the treatment. She lost about 1 inch off her circumference, and she had a significant reduction in the thickness of her subcutaneous fat. So she gained weight, but still has a more slender looking tummy. Okay, like I said, we treated all skin types. And so here is a African-American patient. And this lady also gained weight over the course of the treatment. She gained 4.2 pounds. And you can see that the non-treated area in the upper lateral chest by the bra strap is actually larger as the treatment goes on and she gains weight. But the treated area on the the front surface, the anterior abdomen, is certainly smaller and flatter. And she had about a 17.9% fat thickness reduction of the subcutaneous fat overall. And according to her waist measurements, lost 11.5 centimeters off her circumference over the 12-week period. And she was pretty happy about that, I can tell you. Okay, here's another man that you can see with significant contouring of the anterior abdomen over the 12-week period, again after a single treatment. And he had a fairly remarkable change in his fat thickness, but remember, that's only in the treatment areas, the middle of the treatment areas. It's not a global number. And so he lost fat thickness, the subcu fat, and lost 6 centimeters off his circumference measurements. So we're definitely seeing real reductions in these patients. We didn't have anybody in our 26 patient study who was a non-responder. This is a real thing. I'll kind of wrap it up there. And if there are questions about any of the science part, anything that's related to sales and marketing, I'll leave to representatives from Dominion. Thank you very much.